Now, public health researchers say British American Tobacco South Africa is using a misleading figure to explain why 200 workers could be retrenched in 2023. It all comes after BATSA released a statement explaining that its business has been crippled by the illegal tobacco trade, which it estimates makes up 70% of the country's tobacco business. For some reaction on this, we're joined by Sinenhlanhla Mnguni, the Fair Trade Independent Tobacco Association Chairperson. Very good afternoon to you. Thank you so much for the time. Illicit cigarettes are strangling black tobacco farmers specifically. Talk to us about your understanding of what's happening, what's really happening.
Look, I wouldn't attach too much credibility to the statement which was released by that multinational which you alluded to, British American Tobacco. And of course, we know over the years, through various academic research papers and studies which have been conducted by independent bodies, that they have often inflated the size of the illicit trade in order to advance their own personal economic interests. And we know that ultimately, when it comes to organizations such as this, their bottom line is more important than anything else. So I wouldn't really attach too much credibility, like other academic researchers and institutions have stated, to that particular statement. Of course, the loss of jobs is never something to be celebrated, but we know, of course, that that particular multinational did over the years and decades rather enjoy a monopoly over the South African tobacco industry. And I think what you're seeing now is far more competition, and of course they're losing market share as a result thereof.
So how much of a stake do illegal tobacco trade dealings have within the industry?
Look, the number is quite difficult to establish. I mean, you've heard studies saying 54, some saying 30%, and of course, some studies saying a far higher number. It's difficult to gauge, but what I will say is that it is currently affecting the local legitimate tobacco industry. And we've, of course, raised this issue as far back as time immemorial, actually, with regards to this illicit trade, which seems to have been growing stronger and stronger post the lifting of the cigarette ban during the lockdown period. It's something that we've tried to engage with government on, but they seem to be far more disinterested of late with engaging to the tobacco industry. And it's something that I think has been left to industry to address, which is unfortunate given the economic contribution of the industry as a whole along its value chain.
Then why is the country's illicit trade booming? I mean, I would understand the policies that were rolled out during COVID-19 and the impact. We've had numerous discussions about that over the past few months. But why specifically is this industry booming?
There are a number of factors, Mpho. Look, we know that prior to even the COVID-19 restrictions on the sale of tobacco products, we had the SARS Commission of Inquiry, known as the Newzroom Commission of Inquiry, wherein certain recommendations were made, and we got to understand what had happened to, for instance, that institution, which of course is one of the institutions tasked with enforcing laws with regards to the tobacco industry, and how institutional knowledge in that organization has been hollowed out. And of course, we know that law enforcement agencies throughout are battling in terms of capacity and resources. So that's just unfortunately, in a nutshell, the reasons for it. We just don't seem to have the law enforcement capacity or willpower rather to tackle this particular scourge. And of course, one shouldn't be naive and suggest that any instance that the trade in illicit cigarettes is the only criminal scourge we face as a country. But of course, we have, as an industry, advised governments on a number of ways which we feel they could use to contain the scourge and, of course, to support the legitimate tobacco industry.
So how did it get so bad? I mean, you make mention that COVID-19 was just an additional factor, but this has been happening prior to that.
Yeah, look, with time, of course, with what happened at the receiver of revenue, with a lot of people leaving there, when I think at the time they were really quite capable of dealing with the illicit trade in cigarettes, and we had quite capable people at the receiver at that point. But of course, they were removed. And with time passing, you've just seen that the state really has no will to tackle the illicit trade, and it just seems to be getting worse and worse. And of course, what happened post the lifting of the cigarette ban is that the criminal syndicates behind the illicit trade in cigarettes have gotten stronger and more resourceful, and are now using quite sophisticated networks to entrench their footprint on the South African tobacco market, and they've become bigger and bigger. And of course, that's to the detriment of the legitimate players in the tobacco industry.
Very well. Let's leave it there for now. Thank you so much for your time. That was Sinenhlanhla Mnguni, the Fair Trade Independent Tobacco Association's chairperson.